People said silence meant peace. But in Thornwood Hall, silence was a weapon sharpened on the tongues of family. It erased names, then histories, then the quiet pulse of self, until a girl could stand in a room full of bloodkin and feel less visible than smoke. Ophelia Ashford had learned that lesson at 13, and at 23, she wore it like another coarse apron tied too tight at the waist, another pair of cracked hands plunged into ash water before dawn. Hope survived there only in stubborn, uncelebrated forms. One hidden crust of bread, 1 hour without shouting, one private refusal to forget who she had been told to stop being. Thornwood Hall woke to orders, not greetings. The kitchen bell clanged while the sky was still slate, and Ophelia was already on her knees beside the scullery trough, scrubbing soot from copper pans until her fingers burned and the lye stung old cuts open again. Her wrists throbbed where iron had bitten the day before, dark crescents circling both bones from the shackles Jasper used whenever she spoke out of turn. She kept the sleeves of her work dress pulled low, though no one looked with pity anyway. Pity required seeing someone as human first. "Faster, girl!" Matron Elspeth barked from the doorway, heavy keys rattling at her hip. "Council guests tonight. If one plate is spotted, you sleep in the coal pit again." Ophelia murmured, "Yes, matron." Elspeth sniffed. "No wolf, no title, no right to answer me like family. Use my name." Ophelia lowered her eyes. "Yes, Elspeth." By the second week of October, frost had begun to silver the inner courtyard stones, and Jasper's temper had sharpened with every message arriving from the border packs. Jasper Thornwood liked delivering humiliations in public. At noon, he summoned her to the great hall, while stewards set long tables for the evening feast, then made her kneel beside his chair as if she were a dog that had tracked mud across a carpet. He was broad-shouldered and handsome in the hard, polished way of old portraits, his silver-threaded cloak clasped with the Thornwood crest. Nothing in his face suggested kinship when he looked at her. "You will serve tonight in the lower gallery," he said, not bothering to dismiss the servants who strained to hear. "Eyes down, mouth closed. If any guest asks your name, you answer house hand, not Ashford." Her throat tightened. "My mother was Ashford." His smile never reached his eyes. "Your mother was sentimental." "A weakness," I corrected. A few guards laughed. Ophelia felt each sound like grit under skin. Inside her mind, words rose and tumbled in a frantic present tense current she never spoke aloud. "I am still here. I am not a ghost in their corridors. I carry every task, every bruise, every command, and they call that proof I am nothing. They say no wolf means no soul, no future, no claim. But emptiness does not survive 10 years of this. Emptiness does not memorize ledgers while pretending to polish floors. Emptiness does not count guard rotations, hide scraps of map paper, keep breathing when breathing itself feels like theft. If I am truly hollow, why do they keep chaining me as if I might break free? Why does he watch me when he thinks I cannot see him, as if I am a threat he has not measured yet? I am tired of begging for room to exist. I am tired of apologizing for living. That evening, the feast dragged late. All polished antlers, torchlight, and false laughter. Ophelia moved between tables with wine jugs balanced against aching palms, while Jasper drank with two men in border leathers marked by the red stitch insignia of the Warpack at Black Fen Ridge. She knew enough of politics to understand what their presence meant. Ravencrest had consolidated 3 northern routes. Winter stores were strained, and the council vote could topple old alliances. Soldiers were currency now. So were bodies. Near midnight, Elspeth shoved a tray into Ophelia's arms. "Study," she snapped, "for the master and his guests. Spill this and pray the moon takes you." Jasper's study sat behind carved walnut doors at the end of the west corridor, guarded less heavily than usual because everyone expected the danger to come from outside the estate. Ophelia entered with lowered gaze, set crystal and decanter on the desk, and turned to leave. "Stay," Jasper said. She froze. One of the bordermen leaned back in his chair, boots muddy on Jasper's woven rug. "That her?" Jasper lifted a lazy hand toward Ophelia without looking at her face. "The asset I mentioned. Female, fertile age, no shift history, no pack ties. Documented unstable temperament, but manageable under restraint." The second man grunted. "You're trading bloodline stock for 40 blades?" 50, Jasper corrected. "And a pledge at council. Delivery before first snow." Ophelia's pulse hammered so hard she thought they must hear it. Asset, stock, delivery. For a moment the room tilted, and she tasted iron at the back of her tongue. "I am not for trade," she said, voice rough and too loud in the hush. All three men turned. Jasper stood slowly, controlled fury hardening his posture. "You speak when spoken to," he said. "Remove her." A guard stepped from the wall shadow, seized her arm and wrenched it high enough to spark pain down her shoulder. Jasper crossed the room and pressed 2 fingers under her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Listen carefully, Ophelia. You have no wolf, no rank, and no legal standing. Your usefulness is negotiable. Your defiance is not. You will go where I command, and you will be grateful I found a buyer who prefers living goods." She jerked away, breath shaking. "My mother left records. You burn them." His expression changed for a fraction of a second, a narrow crack in his certainty. Then it vanished. "Chain her in the wash cellar until dawn." The guard dragged her downstairs, through the cold stone passage behind the kitchens, and locked her wrists to a ring in the wall. Hours crawled in damp dark while pipes rattled overhead and mice rustled in straw. She kept replaying Jasper's slip, that brief flicker when she said records. Not guilt. Fear. When Elspeth finally unshackled her at gray dawn, Ophelia moved slowly, masking pain with practiced obedience. She spent the morning hauling coal and polishing banisters, but her thoughts narrowed to one decision with terrifying clarity. If Jasper had proof of her erasure, he also had proof of her name. If she stayed, she would vanish into Blackfen with a forged history strapped to her throat. If she ran blind, he could call her mad and have her dragged back. She needed paper, seal, evidence that could survive his voice. The chance arrived at dusk when Jasper left for pre-council prayers and the west corridor emptied. Ophelia stole the steward's ring of keys from a peg behind the pantry door, tucked it beneath her apron, and walked to the study with a tray she did not need, head bent as if on harmless duty. Her hands trembled so hard the spoons chimed against porcelain. Inside, ink and cedar and cold fire ash scented the air. Jasper kept his desk meticulous, drawers aligned, wax sticks sorted by color, maps pinned with black iron tacks. Ophelia closed the door without latching it, counted 5 breaths, and tried keys in the right side drawer. Third key, soft click. Ledgers first, then correspondence tied in twine. Beneath them lay a sealed parchment packet stamped with the Ashford crest she had not seen in 10 years. Crescent over river reeds, impressed in dark blue wax beside an older royal registry mark. Her vision blurred. She slid the packet free and found a second folded page beneath it, half written in Jasper's hand, listing lineage corrections and witness bribes. She took only the sealed packet. 1 stolen letter could be hidden. 2 could condemn her when searched. Bootsteps sounded in the corridor. Ophelia shoved the packet under her bodice, relocked the drawer, replaced the keys on her tray, and lifted the empty decanter as if she had come to collect it. A junior guard pushed the door open and frowned. "What are you doing in here?" "Master asked for the red ledger moved to Hall Records," she said, steady enough to surprise herself. "He changed his mind." The guard hesitated, then shrugged. "Get out. He is in a foul mood." She did not run until she reached the service stair. Then she moved fast, down through linen storage, across the smokehouse yard, and into the reed path behind the old kennels where the wall had crumbled 2 winters earlier. Night swallowed the estate in layers of mist. Thorns caught her skirt. Mud sucked at her boots. She kept one hand pressed to her chest, feeling the stiff edge of the sealed packet against skin like a second heartbeat. Behind her, bells began to ring. Hounds answered first, distant and furious. Shouts followed, then torchlight scattering across the marsh ridge. Ophelia veered off the cart road and cut into standing water up to her calves, teeth clenched against cold. Reeds whipped her face. Once she slipped and went down hard, palms skidding on slick stone, old shackle bruises flaring white-hot when she caught herself. She rose, staggered, kept moving east where the boundary markers turned from thorn sigils to raven-carved posts. The moon climbed behind torn clouds as the marsh opened into scrub and rock. Ophelia crossed the last drainage ditch on numb legs and saw it at last. A black basalt marker scored with ravencrest runes, half hidden by frost-brittle grass. Safety was still uncertain, political, conditional. But it was not Thornwood. She took 3 more steps, then her knees gave out. Hoofbeats thundered from the northern track, disciplined and fast. Through the ringing in her ears, she caught the metallic scent of blood not her own, the hard leather creak of war harness, the low murmur of men returning from sanctioned killing. A dark column of riders crested the rise, their standard snapping sharp in the night wind. At their center rode a man broad as the saddle beneath him, cloak edged in wolf fur, power rolling off him in a pressure that made the ground feel thinner under her palms. Ophelia lifted her head once, clutching the stolen seal to her chest, and collapsed at the boundary of Ravencrest as King Lachlan's escort reined in around her. The horses stopped so abruptly that gravel spat across her cheek. Ophelia lay half on her side at the base of the boundary stone, lungs dragging for air that would not come clean, every muscle locked between flight and collapse. Iron and wet leather filled the night. Beneath it drifted the sharper scent she had caught before, old fear sweat and fresh death from men who had ridden back from sanctioned violence and expected, perhaps, another threat waiting in the reeds. "Do not move," a voice barked above her. Boots hit ground in a ring around her, cloaks brushed, weapons shifted, harness buckles clicked in disciplined rhythm. Ravencrest moved like one body, not a scattered patrol, but a war escort. Each rider marked by black thread ravens stitched over the heart. Torches were not raised high, only angled enough to read hands, throat, intent. They had done this often. Ophelia tried to push up and failed. Mud dragged at her skirt. One of the riders stepped closer, spear lowered to her shoulder height, and she felt the heat of the metal tip in the cold air. "State your pack," he said. She swallowed hard enough to hurt. "No pack." A rough laugh came from somewhere to her left. "Convenient." "Check her wrists," another said. She could be glamored. She jerked back on instinct as a gloved hand reached for her arm. The movement sent pain flashing through the old bruises from Jasper's shackles, and she bit down a cry. Her fingers clamped tighter over her chest, protecting the sealed packet beneath her bodice with a ferocity that made the nearest guard narrow his eyes. "She is hiding something. Open your hand," he ordered. "No." The words scraped out raw. Hooves shifted behind the front line, then stilled at a single silent command she did not hear, but felt in the sudden obedience of everyone around her. The ring widened. Men who had been poised to seize her drew back one pace, heads dipping fractionally toward the rider in the center. King Lachlan dismounted without haste. Ophelia had seen portraits of alphas in council halls, all polished teeth and staged menace, painted by artists who softened what power did to a room. None of them had prepared her for this. He was not dressed for display. Dark war leathers sat close over broad shoulders, fur-lined mantle thrown back, forearms marked with faint rune scars that seemed older than the skin around them. A shallow cut traced one cheekbone, newly closed. His hair was wind-tossed, black with a thread of silver at one temple that caught the torchlight. He carried no visible crown, only a presence that made every other male at his back feel arranged around him by natural law. He looked at her once and stopped. The pause was brief, but it fractured the rhythm of the courtyard-trained men behind him. One guard shifted, uncertain. Another glanced from the king to Ophelia as if trying to locate what had changed. Lachlan's voice, when it came, was low and precise. "Who pursued you?" "Thornwood Hall." Ophelia forced each word through chattering teeth. "Jasper Thornwood." At Jasper's name, several guards exchanged hard looks. The spear point lifted half an inch, then steadied again. Lachlan took 2 steps closer. Not close enough to crowd her, close enough to see her face without shouting. "Why cross into Ravencrest at night with hounds on your trail?" "Because if I stayed, I would be sold before first snow." Her breath hitched, then steadied by will alone. "And because I carry proof he forged Ashford lineage records." She pressed her hand harder over the hidden packet. "If you send me back, he will burn it and me with it." A commander with a scarred jaw moved in beside the king. "Your Grace, this is convenient timing on Council Week." She could be bait. "She could," Lachlan said. The commander lowered his voice, but not enough. "Then bind her, hold her in outer cells, question at dawn." Ophelia's vision narrowed. Cell, chain, ring in a wall. The marsh cold vanished beneath a flood of memory so vivid her fingers trembled uncontrollably. "I am back in Stone Dark. I am 13 and begging Elspeth for water while rats move in the straw. I am 23 and still counted as labor, not blood. If they lock my wrists now, I break. Not bone. Something worse. I cannot go quiet again. I cannot disappear in another house and call it survival. Breathe. Speak. Hold the letter. Hold your name. If this king is only another polished tyrant, at least let him hear me before he decides what I am worth." She lifted her chin, mud-streaked and shaking. "If you must guard me, do it where I can still breathe. I will answer every question. I will surrender the seal to your hand, not your guards. And only if you swear it enters council record." A few men bristled at her tone. The scar-jawed commander made a sharp, disbelieving sound. "You dictate terms on Ravencrest stone?" Ophelia met his stare with the last of her strength. "No, I ask for law instead of a pit." Lachlan did not rebuke her. He studied her wrists first, the bruises visible where sleeves had slipped. Then he looked at the mud soaked through her hem, the cracked nails, the exhaustion she could no longer hide. His nostrils flared once, catching scent the way wolves did when reading a trail deeper than words. "Name," he said. "Ophelia Ashford." The knight held still. It was not the name alone. Something under his skin shifted in a visible ripple, like restrained force meeting a barrier and deciding whether to shatter it. His shoulders went rigid. A sharp intake of breath cut through the wind. Amber began to bleed into his irises, startling and bright, predator and sovereign surfacing together. The guards saw it and stiffened in alarm. "Your Grace," someone whispered, warning or prayer. Lachlan did not answer. He took one more step, then another. Gaze locked on Ophelia's face, as if she were both wound and remedy. Heat rolled off him in waves that should not have reached her across open air, yet they did, curling into her frozen skin until her numb fingers stung with returning sensation. Then his beast came forward. It was not a full shift. It was more intimate and more terrifying, a deep, primal emergence in the line of his jaw, the tension in his spine, the dangerous grace in the way he moved as if scent had become command. The men around him dropped their eyes, instinctively yielding space to an alpha state few survived challenging. Ophelia should have recoiled. Instead, that same bright current raced up her arms and across her chest. Not pain, not fear alone, but recognition so fierce it made her sway. A molten thread of scent and heat seemed to strike between them, invisible and undeniable, and it hit her sternum with crushing force. The locked chambers she had guarded behind anger and endurance blew open in a single breath. Grief, hunger, fury, longing, all of it surged at once. Lachlan reached her. He stopped an arm's length away, jaw tight, hands flexing once at his sides as if fighting the urge to touch. His gaze flicked to her trembling fingers where they clutched her bodice, then back to her eyes. What looked out through him was ancient, protective, and stunned. And then, in front of his entire guard, the most feared alpha in the north lowered his head to her hands, not to seize, to bow. A collective shock moved through the escort like wind through dry leaves. One rider cursed softly under his breath. Another dropped to one knee without seeming to choose it, pulled down by pack instinct in response to what he had just witnessed. The scar-jawed commander stared as if the laws of rank had been rewritten in front of him. Ophelia could not breathe for 3 full heartbeats. No one had ever bent toward her except to strike, restrain, or command. Lachlan's bowed posture held no performance. It carried reverence edged with disbelief, as if his own wolf had recognized what his mind was still catching up to. When he lifted his face, the amber in his eyes had softened into something raw. "Mate," he said, voice unsteady for the first time. The word was nearly a confession. Her body answered before thought did. A low thrum built beneath her ribs, alien and intimate, as if an inner self long starved had finally heard its true name. Fear slammed into it, hard and immediate. Mate meant claim, vulnerability, a bond she had never imagined being offered by choice. It also meant Jasper would use this, twist it, call her enchantress, liar, trap. She could not sort desire from terror. They arrived braided. Lachlan seemed to read that conflict in her face. He sank down slowly to one knee, bringing himself lower than her crouched posture, palms open and empty where she could see both. "I will not touch you without consent," he said, each word deliberate, carrying to every guard in earshot. "You are under my protection whether you accept this bond tonight or never. Do you understand me, Ophelia Ashford?" Tears burned unexpectedly, furious and hot. She hated that they came now, in front of strangers, in front of men who had seen her collapse in mud. Yet she held his gaze and nodded once. His shoulders eased by a fraction, relief cutting through the strain in his expression. He turned his head slightly, still kneeling, and addressed his men without looking away from her. "Stand down weapons, summon the infirmary. Send 2 outriders to intercept Thornwood hounds at our marker and turn them back with warning, not blood." His voice hardened into command. "Any hand laid on her without her leave will answer to me as treason." Steel slid back into sheaths around them. Movement resumed, controlled, efficient, but Ophelia barely registered it. The bond thread pulsed warm between her and the man kneeling before her, drawing her attention again and again to the impossible fact of him. Lachlan looked at her as if she were not a burden hauled from marsh mud, not damaged stock, not expendable labor, but a person whose no carried weight and whose yes had to be earned. The recognition in that gaze hit harder than any blow she had survived. Locked there, breath mingling in white clouds between them, Ophelia felt terror loosen just enough for one fragile, dangerous thought. Perhaps this was what being seen had always meant. Perhaps this was what being seen had always meant, and the thought was so new she almost recoiled from it. Lachlan rose only when she gave a second, smaller nod. Even then he moved with visible care, as if sudden motion might send her bolting into the dark. "I need to get you warm," he said quietly. "May I carry you to my horse? Or would you rather walk with support? The choice landed in her like a strike, because it was, in its own way, more disorienting than the bond thread humming beneath her sternum. Men like Jasper never asked which pain she preferred. They chose. They called it order. I can walk, she whispered, then took one step and folded at the knees. His hand shot out, then stopped short of her shoulder, fingers flexing in air while he waited. She made herself nod again. Only then did he steady her. One palm braced at her elbow, the other hovering near her back without pressing. He felt heat-soaked even through wet fabric, controlled strength held on a narrow leash. The scar-jawed commander watched with a face carved from stone, saying nothing as Lachlan guided her toward the king's own mount. By the time they reached the saddle, Ophelia's teeth were chattering hard enough to ache. Lachlan stripped his mantle and wrapped it around her shoulders first, fur trapping what little warmth she had left. I will mount behind you, he said, voice pitched for her alone while soldiers moved around them. If any part of this is not bearable, tell me and I stop. Understood? She managed. Yes. He lifted her with a precision that avoided her wrists, settling her sideways at first until she caught breath, then turning her carefully forward. When he swung up behind, he kept one forearm across the pommel rather than around her waist, giving support without caging. It should have felt awkward. Instead, it felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and finding rail where there had never been rail before. They rode through Ravencrest's outer gates beneath iron braziers and raven-carved arches dark with age. The fortress rose from the mountainside in layered black stone, more citadel than hall, with battlements cut to follow the spine of the ridge. Sentinels tracked their approach, fists to heart in salute to their king, then froze almost imperceptibly when they saw who sat in front of him wrapped in royal fur. Questions flickered. None were voiced. Inside the infirmary wing, heat and herb smoke replaced marsh cold. Healers moved quickly, clearing a table, bringing kettles, laying out bandage rolls and moon salt oil in blue glass vials. Lachlan dismissed all but one gray-haired physician, then looked to Ophelia before every new hand came near her. This is Healer Mara, he said. She can examine you now, or later. Your choice. Ophelia's throat tightened. Later. Just later. Mara inclined her head without offense and withdrew to the far shelves. Lachlan crouched in front of Ophelia, where she sat on a padded bench, boots leaving crescents of mud on the floor. Your wrists first? He asked. She stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with the one whose beast had driven warriors silent at the border. Why are you doing this yourself? The question seemed to land somewhere old in him. His gaze dropped briefly to the scars on his own forearm, thin white lines crossing rune-marked skin. Because I know what it costs to be handled like an object when you are injured, he said. And because my wolf recognized you before I had words for it. That gives me duty, not permission. She let out a breath she had not noticed she was holding. He waited until she extended her hands. Even then he touched only skin just above the bruises, thumbs warm as he turned her wrists to the light. Rage moved through his expression, swiftly banked. Shacklebite, he said, too level, old and new together. He looked up. I need to clean and oil these. It will sting for a moment. May I? Yes. He worked with infuriating patience, cloth dipped in warm water, then moon salt oil spread in slow circles that drew fire from torn flesh. Every flinch stopped him instantly. Every pause ended only when she said, "Continue." No one had ever treated her pain as information rather than inconvenience, and that kindness opened a different sort of ache, one she did not know how to hold. When he asked about her back, she went rigid. The brands, Mara said softly from across the room. They need salve, or they may crack by morning. Ophelia's first instinct was refusal. Exposure had always invited mockery, inspection, judgment. Lachlan seemed to read the panic gathering in her shoulders. "You can keep your shift on," he said. "We open only what must be treated. Mara will stay in the room. If you say stop, we stop. I am sitting on clean linen while a king kneels in front of me with medicine in his hands, and my body does not trust it, cannot trust it, because kindness in Thornwood always came with a hidden hook. I am waiting for the demand beneath the mercy, the price that will arrive after I relax. There is always a price. But he keeps asking. He keeps choosing the slower road when power would let him choose the fast one. I do not understand this man. I do not understand the pull between us that feels like recognition and risk braided tight. I am afraid of wanting to believe him. I am more afraid that I already do." She turned carefully, lifting her braid and pulling the back of her shift down enough to reveal the old servant brands across shoulder blade and spine, raised white lines crossed by newer abrasions. Silence thickened behind her. Lachlan did not curse. He did not ask who had done it. He simply said, very quietly, "May I?" When she nodded, his touch came feather-light at first, salve spread with 2 fingers to avoid pressure on the worst ridges. Warmth seeped in where pain had lived so long it felt structural. Once she hissed and tried to twist away. He drew back at once, hands open, waiting. She breathed until the room steadied, then leaned forward again. An hour later, after tea she barely tasted and broth Mara insisted on, Lachlan escorted her to a small chamber adjoining his own war rooms rather than the outer cells the commander had wanted. A fire burned low, blankets folded at the foot of a narrow bed, one shutter cracked to let in night air. He remained at the threshold. "I will station guards outside, not in here," he said. "No chains, no locks from the outside. If you need me, there is a bell rope by the bed." He hesitated, tension crossing his jaw. "If the bond overwhelms you, speak. I can increase distance." Her laugh was brief and rough, startling them both. "You are asking if I need the king to stand farther away from me in his own fortress. I am asking what helps you feel safe." The word safe felt foreign on her tongue. She looked at the chair near the hearth, then back at him. "Stay until I sleep," she said, voice barely audible. "Not close. Just stay." He inclined his head once and took the chair she indicated, forearms on knees, gaze fixed on the fire rather than her. Distance held. Presence held. At some point, exhaustion dragged her under anyway. The nightmare came fast. Stone walls, iron ring. Jasper's voice saying asset, stock, delivery. She thrashed awake with a strangled sound, hands clawing at blankets as if they were restraints. The chamber was dark except for embers and moonlight. Lachlan was still in the chair, exactly where she had left him, awake with a blade laid across his lap untouched. "You are in Ravencrest," he said, low and steady. "No one enters this room without your consent." Her pulse slammed against her throat. "I am sorry," she blurted. "I am making trouble." His head lifted sharply, and for the first time anger showed without disguise. Not at her. "Do not apologize for surviving captivity," he said, quiet steel in every syllable. "Not in my house. Not ever." The words settled through her, shaking in slow layers. She lay back, not sleeping, simply listening to the cadence of his breathing and the occasional shift of chair legs on stone. Dawn had begun to gray the window when she finally drifted again. By late morning, Ravencrest's War Council convened in the high chamber above the inner court, and Ophelia stood at Lachlan's right in a clean but plain dress borrowed from the infirmary stores, wrists bandaged, chin lifted by stubbornness more than confidence. The hall was built for intimidation, vaulted ceiling ribbed in dark oak, map table inset with silver root lines, banners of allied packs hanging like watchful witnesses. Elders filled the crescent benches, iron bracelets marking rank. Commanders lined the walls in muted armor. Murmurs followed her entry like sparks catching dry tinder. That is the Thornwood fugitive. She crossed during War Week. Look at her wrists. Lachlan did not silence them immediately. He let the room see her standing beside him unbound, his posture unyielding, before he took the central dais. Proceed, he said. Counselor Bren, oldest of the elders and proud of it, rose with visible disdain. Your Grace, before route allocations, we address the security breach. This female arrived from a hostile estate carrying unknown documents and claims blood right to Ashford. We advise immediate restraint pending interrogation. A second elder added, chain her in the warded cells. If her story holds, no harm done. If not, we prevent infiltration. Ophelia felt the old panic press at her ribs. She locked her knees and kept her voice in check. The packet is sealed with Ashford wax and royal registry. It can be opened before witnesses now. Bren snorted. Imposters can buy wax. Scarjaw Commander Rourke stepped from the wall, eyes on Ophelia rather than the king. Until verified, she should not stand armed men's distance from the throne. He reached for her arm, brisk and proprietary, as if she were evidence to be repositioned. Lachlan moved before thought could track him. His hand clamped Rourke's wrist mid-grab, twisted, and drove him to one knee with a controlled lock that stopped just short of break. The sound that tore from Rourke was shock more than pain. In the same breath, Lachlan released an alpha command that struck the chamber like thunder contained in bone. Kneel. Power rolled outward, not metaphor, not performance, but pack law made physical. Elders dropped where they stood, some with curses, some with startled gasps, heads bowed under instinct they could not resist. Even Ophelia felt it brush her skin like pressure before storm, yet it curved around her, never forcing, never crushing. Lachlan's voice cut through the stunned silence. Any hand raised against Ophelia Ashford without her leave will be treated as treason against the crown. We are not Thornwood. We do not chain witnesses to soothe cowardice. He released Rourke, who stayed down breathing hard, face flushed with humiliation and dawning respect. Lachlan turned to Ophelia then, anger banked into solemnity, and removed the black-silver signet ring from his own hand. Raven crest, king's authority, heavy with years. Until your status is proven before this council and the Moonlaw archives, he said, loud enough for every bent head to hear. You will wear my seal in public space, not as possession, as recognition that you stand under crown protection and speak with lawful standing. He offered the ring on his open palm. Ophelia stared at it, then at him. No pity in his face, no spectacle. Only a fierce, unwavering decision that she would not be erased in this room. Her fingers shook when she took the signet, and a low current of awareness moved through the bond at the contact, steady rather than consuming. She slid the ring onto her thumb where it fit too large, absurd and perfect. Slowly, the tight knot behind her ribs loosened for the first time in years. I accept, she said. When she lifted her gaze to the kneeling council, she did not feel small, not whole yet, not unafraid, but no longer invisible and no longer alone. No longer alone did not mean unopposed. Lachlan released the alpha pressure in careful increments, and the chamber rose in uneasy stages, elders bracing palms on carved benches as if the stone itself had tilted under them. Ophelia kept the signet on her thumb, its weight strange and steady, while Counselor Bren avoided her gaze with the brittle dignity of a man forced to remember new rules in public. The map table doors opened before anyone called for them, and a gate captain strode in with a messenger at his back, both mud-streaked from hard riding. Dispatch from Thornwood Hall, the captain said. Sealed for Crown and Council. The courier knelt, head bowed, and extended a black wax tube marked with Jasper's crest. Lachlan accepted it, broke the seal, and read once in silence. The tendons in his jaw hardened. He handed the parchment to Bren. "Read it aloud. Every word." Bren's voice carried, dry and reluctant. Jasper accused Ophelia of theft, fraud, and destabilizing influence through illicit bond craft. He claimed she had fabricated Ashford lineage with stolen wax and forged registry marks. He requested immediate extradition under border security law and offered to restore political equilibrium by taking temporary regency authority over disputed lands. The final lines were written in a denser hand, almost pressed into the page. At moonrise, under the coming eclipse, Thornwood would convene an emergency rite at the ancient stone circle to secure levy magic for regional defense. Attendance of all neighboring packs was strongly advised. The hall went very still. Rourke spoke first, voice rough. "Levy magic has been dormant for 2 generations." "Dormant is not dead," Mara said from the side colonnade where healers observed council by custom. "Not if someone has blood to wake it." Ophelia felt cold wick through her ribs despite the fire braziers. "Ashford blood," she said. "He needs Ashford blood. That circle was built on our line oath." Bren snapped around to her. "Convenient that you know right mechanics." "Convenient that I was raised in the house he stole." She shot back, then forced her tone down. "Jasper does not care about defense. If he wakes levy bindings, he can compel oath debt from packs already short on food and men. He will call coercion stability." A murmur ran through the benches, this time not dismissive. Lachlan took the letter back and flattened it against the table beside route maps. "There is more," he said. From the tube he drew a second strip of parchment, narrow and unsigned, written in the kitchen cipher Thornwood servants used when they had no safe language left. Ophelia recognized Elspeth's clipped loops immediately, and her stomach dropped. Nessa, Pip, Tomlin, taken from service quarters after midnight, held in Upper East rooms under guard. Master says moonrise exchange for runaway girl, do not challenge in hall. Her hand shook once. She made it still by force. The names were small lives she knew by laugh and habit. Nessa, who hid crusts in apron pockets and pretended she had forgotten them. Pip, who counted spoons to calm himself when shouting started. Tomlin, solemn and skinny, always carrying wood too heavy for his shoulders because no one asked his age, only his output. Lachlan read the strip, and his expression turned lethal in a quiet way that made nearby commanders shift their stance. "He is holding children as leverage. He is signaling he will do anything that preserves his vote block," Rourke said. "If Pax believe he can trigger levy magic, half the border will stand behind him out of fear." By the time the noon horn sounded from the East Tower, Jasper's accusations had already outpaced the parchment, moving through kitchens, barracks, and trade stalls on quicker tongues than any official rider. Lachlan dismissed the full council and kept only Bren, Rourke, Maera, Ophelia, and Archivist Saren in the war room behind the dais. The room smelled of wax, steel, and old vellum. Saren arrived carrying 3 Moonlaw codices bound in cracked red leather, setting them down with reverent urgency. "Ashford trial clause is real," she said, fingers already turning marked pages. "Pre-unification statute. If lineage is contested and crown authority is challenged, claimant may invoke truth magic judgment in public assembly under full moon witness." "Eclipse is not full moon," Bren muttered. Saren did not look up. "The clause allows continuation through shadow phase if moon remains visible at invocation." Rourke swore softly. He chose tonight for optics. Fear in the sky, packs gathered, law twisted to look like legitimacy. Ophelia moved to the narrow window slit and watched ravens wheel above the inner yard. Below, people pointed toward the council wing, voices rising and falling in tight clusters. She could feel the bond thread to Lachlan at her back. Not a chain, more like a warm current that sharpened her awareness whenever he stepped closer. It unsettled and steadied her in the same breath. I need to answer him publicly, she said without turning. If I hide behind your wards, he controls the narrative and the right. Bren scoffed. You are one unverified claimant with a stolen packet. Lachlan's reply came like iron set on stone. She is a lawful witness under Crown protection. Choose your language with care. Silence stretched. Then Mayera spoke, practical as ever. Rumor says she bewitched the king. If she appears only beside him, rumor hardens. If she appears before all packs with documented clause and sealed registry, rumor can be broken. Rourke exhaled through his nose. Or she is killed in a crowd. No, Ophelia said, and turned back to them. Not if we structure it as judgment, not negotiation. Witness circles, written charges, oath markers, no closed chambers, no private custody. Jasper thrives in rooms he controls. I am standing in a war room with men who decide borders, and I am asking to walk into the place that taught me fear. My knees want to lock. My voice wants to hide behind easier people. I can feel the pull toward Lachlan like heat in winter, and part of me wants to let him choose, let him shield, let this become his fight, because he is built for command and I am built from scraps. But that is the old trap with softer edges. If he fights for me while I stay silent, Jasper still owns my story. I am done being cargo in someone else's strategy. I am terrified. I am also clear. Those children said my name in a house where names were rationed. I will not leave them under his hand while I wait to be deemed credible by men who never scrub blood from kitchen stone. Lachlan watched her through the end of that silence, something fierce and grief-struck moving behind his eyes. Come here, he said quietly. She crossed to him. He lifted his hand, then paused, waiting. She gave a small nod. His fingers settled around her bandaged wrist, careful of healing skin, and the contact sent a low thrum through the bond that had nothing to do with spectacle and everything to do with being known. I want you alive, he said. That is not politics. I know. I can send strike teams for the children and challenge Jasper separately. And he will claim you abducted his wards and fabricated rescue as pretext for annexation. She held his gaze. You taught this council we are not Thornwood. Then let them watch us prove it. For a heartbeat, his control looked thin enough to cut. Then he inclined his head. Not surrender, not command, an earned alignment. Then we do this by law and force together. Orders followed in sharp sequence. Rourke dispatched 3 covert pairs to verify the servant quarters and locate the children without engagement unless extraction could occur unseen. Saren prepared authenticated copies of the trial clause and registry procedures. Mara requested oath salts and truth sigil chalk from temple stores. Bren, pale and tight-mouthed, was sent to summon neutral witnesses from 2 neighboring packs, so no one could call Ravencrest's process closed. The first raven returned before dusk, wing feathers singed at the tips. Its tube carried Jasper's reply to Lachlan's demand for immediate child release. Denied. Attend the circle or accept consequences of noncompliance with emergency levy order. With it came a broadside already spreading through market lanes, printed on cheap pulp and stamped with Thornwood ink. A wolfless pretender enchants the crown. Citizens urged to petition for her removal, for pack safety. The campaign was fast, coordinated, and expensive. Jasper had prepared this long before she crossed Ravencrest Stone. As twilight bled across the mountain ridge, the antagonist stopped sending words and started moving bodies. Lookout sounded 2 short horns from the southern wall. A column of Thornwood riders had taken position beyond arrow range, not attacking, just visible, banners lifted high enough to be counted from the battlements. Behind them, Wagons bearing council insignia from 2 border packs rolled into formation, their presence a public signal. Jasper had allies willing to legitimize his right before it began. In the inner court, petitions arrived in bundles. Some begged Lachlan not to risk war over one claimant. Some demanded Ophelia be surrendered to prevent levy activation. One sheet, unsigned, listed the names of every servant who had ever worked Ashford kitchens and marked those now missing from duty. Nessa, Pip, Tomlin were circled in red. Rourke returned from the wall with hard news. No visual on the children from this distance. Thornwood rotated window guards and curtained Upper East completely. Our covert pairs confirm the cipher came from Elspeth's hand, but the house is locked down. Lachlan slammed his palm once against the map table, a single contained crack of sound. He is forcing a deadline. Moonrise approached under a sky already dimming at the edges with eclipse shadow. Torches were lit across Ravencrest in double rows. Not celebration, not panic, readiness. Ophelia stood in the armory passage while Maera fastened leather bracers over her healing wrists, the king's signet still on her thumb. The sealed Ashford packet strapped flat beneath a reinforced bodice so no hand could snatch it cleanly. Footsteps stopped behind her. Lachlan's voice was low. Last chance to stay behind the ward line. She faced him. He had changed into black war leathers etched with old runes. No mantle, no crown, only the blade at his hip, and that unguarded intensity she felt even when he did not touch her. "If I stay," she said, "Jasper wins before we arrive." He searched her face, then offered his forearm, warrior to warrior. She gripped it. Their bond answered like struck metal, bright and steady. A runner burst into the passage, breathless. "Your Grace," Thornwood envoy at the outer gate. He brought a speaking crystal keyed to Jasper. They took the message in the gatehouse with witnesses present. The crystal flared white, then filled with Jasper's image, composed and immaculate in ceremonial black, the ancient stone circle visible behind him. Around the edges of the projection stood gathered pack delegates and council banners. Jasper smiled as if hosting a feast. "Niece," he said smoothly, looking straight through the glass as if he could smell her fear from miles away. "You have 1 hour of moon shadow. Come to the circle and submit to lawful custody, and your little kitchen conspirators return to work by dawn. Refuse, and I will consider their assistance in your theft an act of treason by household staff. You know the penalties. Bring your forged papers. Bring your king. Let everyone watch what truth does to liars." The image snapped dark. No one spoke for several seconds. Wind pressed against the gatehouse shutters. From beyond the southern wall came the distant roll of drums from Jasper's assembled line, steady as a heartbeat. Lachlan looked at Ophelia, waiting for her choice in front of all of them. She lifted her chin, pulse hammering but voice clean. "Prepare the witness convoy. We go to the stone circle under Moonlaw, not his custody." Outside, the first bite of eclipse crossed the moon, and Ravencrest's war horns answered Thornwood across the valley. The gate chains dropped, and the witness convoy rolled out in a long black line of wagons, riders, and torchbearers, banners furled to avoid any claim of war declaration before judgment. Ophelia rode in the lead carriage with Lachlan, Rourke, Saren, and 2 neutral scribes from the border packs. The sealed Ashford packet pressed under her palm the entire descent. By the time the convoy cleared the southern switchbacks, the eclipse had swallowed a third of the moon. The ancient stone circle rose from a high shelf of land where the valley narrowed into a wind tunnel. Torches ringed the site in 3 uneven tiers. Thornwood troops stood to the east in disciplined blocks, Ravencrest Guard to the west, and between them packed delegates from 6 territories, council envoys, traders, and opportunists, who came whenever law and blood were about to collide. Jasper had turned it into theater exactly as Ophelia expected. What she had not expected was the dais he had built over the old oath basin, draped in Thornwood black, with levy runes painted fresh in silver chalk. He stood at its center in ceremonial coat, hair tied back, expression calm enough to pass for righteous. Two elders she recognized from border petitions flanked him, along with a temple officiant she did not recognize and did not trust. When Ophelia stepped down from the carriage, murmurs broke like surf through the crowd. Wolfless pretender, bewitcher, Ashford heir, king's mate. Jasper opened his arms as if welcoming kin to a feast. "Ophelia," he called, voice amplified by the circle stones. "You came. Good. Surrender the forged documents and submit to household custody. We can still contain this embarrassment." Lachlan moved half a pace in front of her, but Ophelia touched his sleeve and stepped to his shoulder, not behind him. The king's signet glinted on her thumb, too large still, impossible to miss. "Moon Law Assembly was invoked," she said, projecting toward the witness benches. "Custody rests with neutral record until judgment. You know that." Jasper smiled without warmth. "I know frightened girls memorize rules they cannot wield." He flicked two fingers. Thornwood wardens started down the dais steps with iron cuffs in hand. Chaos cracked open at once. Ravencrest soldiers surged. Border delegates shouted objections. And someone from the back hurled a torch that hit stone and spun sparks across the outer ring. Horses screamed at the perimeter. The temple officiant tried to call for silence and got drowned out by accusations of fraud from three sides. One of the wardens lunged through the crush toward Ophelia with the cuffs raised. Lachlan intercepted him with a shoulder check that sent both men skidding in dust. Rourke barked formation orders while Saren shoved the law codex into a scribe's hands and climbed the witness block, shouting procedural clauses until her voice turned raw. For 3 breathless seconds, Ophelia lost sight of the central dais and felt the old panic take her by the throat. Noise, hands, men deciding, her body becoming a disputed object again. Then a deep metallic groan rolled through the ground. The oath basin beneath Jasper's platform lit from within, runes climbing the stone lip in jagged white lines. He had begun the levy rite during the commotion, slicing his own palm and smearing blood over the painted symbols. Thorn vines, dormant for years, snapped awake from cracks in the circle and lashed toward the center lane where Ophelia stood. One caught her ankle and yanked. She hit her knees hard enough to jar her teeth. Another vine coiled for her wrist, barbed and fast. Lachlan reached for her, but she shouted, "No!" and rolled toward the inner ring before the vine could lock. Dust and ash filled her mouth. The crowd recoiled as the runes brightened, and Jasper's voice cut through the uproar like a knife. "Witnesses!" he called. "Observe how unstable imposters disrupt sacred defense rights. Observe how Ravencrest brings war to holy ground." He was trying to fix the story in real time. If she let him frame this as abduction and riot, the truth inside her packet would never matter. Ophelia pushed to her feet in the exact center of the old ring, inside the line where law took precedence over rank when properly invoked. She tore the packet from her bodice, lifted it high, and shouted until her throat burned. "I invoke Ashford trial clause under Moon Witness. Neutral scribes forward. Crown seal witness. Bloodline oath now." Saren answered first. "Invocation heard." She jumped down from the witness block with both scribes, shoving through the last of the scuffle as Rourke's guard locked a perimeter around the ring. Jasper's composure fractured. "You have no standing." Ophelia held out her bandaged hand to Lachlan. "Blade." He stared at her, feral fury still riding just beneath his skin. Then he placed his short ceremonial knife across her palm handle first and stepped back, giving her the space she demanded in front of everyone. The cut was clean and immediate. Blood welled bright against moon-whitened skin. She pressed her hand to the oath stone and spoke the old words her mother had once whispered over kitchen embers, words Jasper thought he had erased with ledgers and locks. "By reed and river, by first line and surviving line, I call truth over forged ink. Let false claim burn. Let blood answer blood." The stone answered. Silver-white light burst from the basin and climbed her arm in branching lines that did not burn and did not ask permission. A low thrum built in her chest, then broke open into a vast, lucid awareness that made every scent, heartbeat, and shifting stance around the circle sharpen at once. Not emptiness. Never emptiness. Power she had carried blind for years rose to meet her call, and the force of it threw Jasper's half-formed levee web backward like torn cloth. Gasps tore through the crowd. Several delegates dropped to their knees. Bren, white-faced at the front witness bench, stared as if watching history rewrite itself in flame. Above the circle, runes took shape in the air. Lines of registry script, signatures, seals. The forged entries in Jasper's hand blackened first, then peeled away in sparks. Underneath them, the original Ashford lineage surfaced in clear moon script, her mother's name linked to hers by lawful mark and royal registry imprint. Jasper roared and leapt from the dais with a ritual blade drawn from his sleeve. "You were born to serve me, not stand above me." He came straight at her throat. Ophelia caught his wrist mid-strike. Shock flashed through his face before rage swallowed it. Her grip held. Newly awakened strength locked his arm in place while the blade trembled inches from her shoulder. She drove his hand downward, forcing the edge toward stone. "I was born to survive you, then end you." She slammed her blood-marked palm against his chest. The truth sigil ignited beneath her handprint, a white seal spreading through his ceremonial coat and into skin. Jasper screamed, staggered back, and tried to shift through it, bones snapping into partial wolf form as he fought the binding. He lunged again on claws half-formed, eyes gone feral with panic and hate. Lachlan's beast met him in a blur of black and amber, a controlled collision that hammered Jasper to the stones and pinned him at the edge of the oath basin. No tearing frenzy, no loss of command, only decisive force. Lachlan's forearm braced across Jasper's throat while his other hand wrenched the ritual blade free and threw it beyond reach. "Sentence," Lachlan said, voice like a struck bell. "His bylaw, yours by right." Every witness stared at Ophelia. Wind drove ash across the ring. The eclipse deepened. Silver rim and shadow balanced overhead. She stepped forward, blood still dripping from her palm onto the old Ashford carvings. "Jasper Thornwood," she said, each word carrying to the outer torches. "You forged lineage records, trafficked bond levies, and used unlawful coercion against protected households. Under Moon Law and invoked trial clause, I issue traitor's severance." Jasper spat bloodless foam and strained against Lachlan's hold. "You think this crown male chose you for worth? He chose you for breeding. You will kneel the same way." Ophelia did not flinch. "No." She pressed her wounded hand to the central sigil one final time. The thorn vines Jasper had awakened recoiled, then reversed. Chains of white-lit briar erupted from the cracked runes at his sides and wrapped him from wrists to chest, binding with the same magic he had meant to use on others. He thrashed once, twice, then stilled as moonfire rose around him in a clean, vertical flare. It was bright enough to cast every face in stark relief. When the light fell away, there was only ash on stone and a blackened thornwood crest clasp split neatly down the center. Silence held the valley for a long, suspended beat. Then sound returned in fragments. A child crying somewhere in the back rows, armor settling, delegates whispering prayers, scribes scratching frantically to keep pace with what they had just witnessed. Bren stood with visible effort and bowed toward the ring, not to Lachlan, to Ophelia. "Recorded," he said hoarsely. "Lawful judgment witnessed." Rourke climbed the witness steps and raised his voice. "Covert teams report in. Nessa, Pip, and Tomlin recovered from Thornwood East Wing during the Circle chaos. Confirmation reached command only now that the legal ring is secured. Uninjured. Under Ravencrest protection." Ophelia closed her eyes for half a second, relief so sharp it nearly folded her. When she looked again, Lachlan was on his feet beside her, ash on his jaw, gaze fixed on her face with a fierce, unguarded reverence that made the roaring crowd fade to distance. She was shaking. So was he. But Jasper's claim was gone. The forged lines were gone. And in the center of the oldest law stone in the valley, her name burned clear where everyone could read it. She was shaking. So was he. But Jasper's claim was gone. The forged lines were gone. And in the center of the oldest law stone in the valley, her name burned clear where everyone could read it. Lachlan touched 2 fingers to his heart, then to his brow, the old warrior sign for witness and vow. Rourke holds the ring, Saren holds the records. Come with me. He did not pull her. He offered his hand and waited until she placed hers in it. They crossed the back of the stone circle while commanders took statements and scribes sealed tablets in wax. The night smelled of ash, crushed sage, and cold water from the altar pool fed by a spring beneath the ridge. The pool's silver-black surface echoed the first bond strike she had felt at the border marker carved into rock. Now moonlight, half-shadowed by eclipse, turned the water into black glass threaded with silver. Lachlan stopped at the edge and faced her fully. Ash streaked his cheek. A shallow cut crossed his knuckles. His eyes, still bright with the beast close to the surface, held no command now, only raw devotion and restraint. Ophelia, he said, voice roughened by everything they had survived in one night. I can wait until dawn, until another moon, until you ask me first. But if you want this bond sealed now, I will mark you only with your spoken yes. The words landed deeper than any victory cry from the ring behind them. She looked down at their joined hands, at the blood dried in the lines of her palm from the oath cut, at his thumb brushing once over her bandage like a question. Fear was still present, but it had changed shape. It no longer felt like a locked cellar. It felt like standing on a threshold and choosing to step. I am here with the man whose power can drop a war council to its knees, and he is asking like a man who understands that trust is built one consent at a time. I am not traded stock. I am not household labor waiting for the next order. I am the name written in Moonfire, the one Jasper could not erase. My body remembers chains, still flinches from quick hands, still expects the price after kindness. Yet the bond between us does not feel like a cage. It feels like a door opening inward, toward heat, toward home, toward a life where my no is honored and my yes is mine to give. I am terrified. I am certain. I choose this. She lifted her chin. Yes. His breath left him in a visible shudder. Say it again for me. Yes, Lachlan. Mark me. He closed his eyes for one heartbeat, then opened them with something fierce and reverent in his gaze. Mine, he whispered, not as possession, as vow. If you still want me after, I am yours. Yours, she answered, and the word trembled before it steadied. Mate. He stepped in slowly until their foreheads touched. Mate, he echoed. When he bared his teeth, he kept one hand cradling the back of her neck and the other braced at her waist so she could move away at any instant. She did not move away. She turned her head, exposing the curve where neck met shoulder, and felt his breath warm against skin before the bite came. Pain flashed bright and clean, not tearing, not cruelty, a sharp claiming point that made her gasp and clutch his shoulders. Heat followed at once, pouring from the mark into her bloodstream in a rush of molten gold and silver-white light. The ache transformed, spreading through chest and spine as if every empty place inside her had been found and filled with living fire. Her knees weakened. Lachlan held her upright without tightening into restraint, his own body shaking with the force of the bond taking root. Images hid in pulses through the new link. Him at 16, blood on snow after a border betrayal, swearing never to trust softly again. Him in the war chamber on sleepless nights, staring at maps until dawn. Him at the marsh boundary seeing her and feeling his beast bow before his pride could argue. Alongside them came her own echoes rising and answered. Ashwater, cellar stone, the sound of bells when she ran, and then his voice in the dark saying, no survivor apologized in his house. The wound at her shoulder burned once more, then settled into a deep, steady thrum. Lachlan drew back only enough to look at her face. Are you with me? She laughed through tears she did not hide. Completely. His expression broke into something she had never seen on him before, a joy almost boyish beneath all that kingly gravity. He tipped his head to the side and exposed the powerful line of his throat, then turned further and offered his shoulder, marking point clear beneath torn leather. Your claim, he said. Equal. Chosen. She felt her teeth lengthen with instinct she had once been told she lacked. The animal part of her did not frighten her now. It stood beside her like truth. She set one hand on his chest, felt his heartbeat slam against her palm, and bit into the offered shoulder. He hissed, a sound edged with pain and wonder, then laughed once under his breath as warmth surged back through the bond in a powerful return wave. The connection locked, brightened, and then stabilized into something vast and calm. Not a storm anymore, a river finding its bed. Mine, she whispered against his skin as she lifted her head. Yours, he answered immediately, pressing his brow to hers again. Always. Behind them, the circle had gone quiet in that instinctive way crowds did when they understood they were witnessing sacred law fulfilled. No one interrupted. No one dared make spectacle of it. They stood holding each other beside the altar pool while the eclipse began to pass. Their breathing matched. Their heartbeats aligned through the bond until she could not tell where one ended and the other began. For the first time in her life, the silence around her was not a weapon. It was peace. By dawn, the high hall at Ravencrest was full again, but the atmosphere had changed from suspicion to stunned clarity. Saren placed the sealed Ashford packet on the central table, broke the wax before neutral witnesses, and read every line into record. The royal registry mark matched the moon script testimony from the circle exactly. The partial lineage corrections sheet recovered from Jasper's desk was entered as corroborating evidence when Rourke's search team retrieved it from Thornwood's sealed study. Bren rose, older than pride now, and bowed toward Ophelia. I watched your mother sign the Winter Grain Accords 20 years ago, he said, voice carrying. I recognized her hand in those records and chose not to speak when Jasper paid for silence in later years. That hesitation nearly cost this territory its law. I submit my censure and my vote to ratify Queen Luna Ophelia Ashford by right of blood and invoked judgment. The chamber held that confession without noise. Then, one by one, bracelets struck tabletops in assent. At the side doors, Mara ushered in 3 small figures wrapped in new cloaks. Nessa ran first, nearly colliding with protocol ropes before Ophelia crossed and caught her. Pip pressed into her other side, shaking with delayed shock. Tomlin stood stiff for 2 breaths, trying to be brave, then folded against her waist and clung. You came back, Nessa whispered. I said I would, Ophelia answered, kissing the top of her head. And you are under my protection now. All of you. Elspeth was brought under guard at her own request, not in chains. She knelt, keys removed from her belt for the first time Ophelia had ever seen. I sent the cipher, she said, eyes fixed on the floor. I should have done more years ago. I will testify to every contract and every child taken off ledger if you want the full accounting. Ophelia held her gaze for a long moment. You testify. Fully. Then you work restitution under Maera and Saren with no authority over households. Earn back what can be earned. Elspeth bowed her head, relief and grief breaking together across her face. Yes, my lady. At sunset, in the restored Ashford courtyard where storage cots had once lined a damp wall, stone lanterns were lit in rings of amber flame. The cracked servant door had been replaced with carved cedar bearing the Ashford reeds and Ravencrest ravens side by side. Displaced families filled the terraces, each called by name as Saren read the joint decree. Thornwood lands folded into protected alliance, servant contracts abolished in every attached holding, household workers granted legal status and wage law under Crown enforcement. Rourke oversaw the seal line. Bren signed first in public penance. Then Mara lifted the moon-forged circlet and set it on Ophelia's head. By blood proven, by choice declared, by bond complete, Mara said, we crown you Queen Luna of Ashford and Ravencrest. Lachlan stepped beside her throne dais and knelt, not to perform submission, but to make his oath where all could witness it. I stand beside her, not ahead, he said. My crown does not diminish hers. My law does not silence hers. My life is hers to trust. Ophelia touched the mark at her shoulder, then his at the same mirrored place, and the bond answered with a warm, steady pulse. Rise, mate. He rose smiling, and the courtyard answered with cheers that sounded nothing like the old Thornwood laughter she remembered. These voices were fierce, relieved, and full of belonging. Later, when lantern light softened and children chased each other between tables where no one shouted at them for taking space, Pip looked up at her with solemn awe and said, "They used to say you had no wolf?" Ophelia glanced at Lachlan, at the king whose beast had bowed first and now stood at her side with unhidden pride. She bent and tapped Pip gently over the heart. "Then let them keep saying it," she said. "We know what they missed."